Hey everybody, Amy here with a quick interlude in our discussion of the English Civil War, or the Civil War. Because it got a little bit derailed over the last week, partly because of life, but partly because there was something that didn't quite sit right with me when I watched part 2 after I posted it. And it took me a while to pin it down, and it had to do with the way I was talking about religion. Because, this series is basically an attempt to summarize these books that I've read about the time period. And I realized, looking back, that when I read these books, that, yes, they got me some good insights that I do want to share with y'all, but they also led me into a little bit of a trap. And I want to keep you all from falling into that same trap that you might if I just blindly summarize these histories. And again, the trap has to do with religion. We talk about these two pyramids, the political and the religious. And when you read about this time period or watch a series of videos about this time period, you'll quickly realize, A, it is fascinating how every argument going on at the time was this, integrated mix of political and spiritual. And B, the writers or video people you are experiencing are going to focus almost entirely on the political side. And the trap is to think that the reason that they are focusing on the political side is because the spiritual side is unimportant. That it's just a bunch of nonsense, silly window dressing. I mean, especially if you, like me, were raised in a religious tradition that you are, when I first read these stories, was falling away from my religious tradition. It's easy to say, oh, well, that didn't really mean anything. That was just window dressing for the actual political struggles that were going on, that were the real issue. That's not true. The spiritual side was at least equally important to the political side. I mean, for one thing, if you were to call any of these characters back that we talk about in this story and ask them what their motivations were, I think without exception, every single one of them would first reach for a spiritual argument as their primary motivator rather than a political one. I mean, even the whole reason I think that this is relevant is because this affected the thinking of the Puritans, the English people who settled in New England and helped shape America. And the reason they fled to New England wasn't so much to get out from under the rule of the king as to get out from under the rule of the Archbishop of Canterbury. So the religious side was important. And, the other reason that, historians don't talk about the spiritual side as much is not because it's unimportant, but because, in a way, it's too important. Because, religion is hard to talk about. That's why it causes so many wars. That's why it caused this war. Because it cuts to the very root of everything that makes us human. It cuts to our soul. The reasons that we get out of bed in the morning and how we get to sleep at night. And the spiritual questions that we all have to answer for ourselves. We cannot learn those lessons from history. And so, historians, quite rightly, don't talk about them as much. But, we can draw political lessons from history, because, we live in a society, and always have, and how people relate to each other is something that we can look and gain examples from, but not when it comes to the deeper things about religion. So, please don't think when I talk about religion that I'm dismissing it as unimportant, or even that I feel that the people who had the right side of the political argument also had the right side of the religious argument, because as somebody who was raised Catholic, and Catholics being largely the villains in this story, especially, I mean, they were nightmarish villains to many of the main characters, and I don't agree with that at all. My sympathy is in many ways a lot more with the Catholics, particularly the Irish Catholics, because they're, my forefathers and whatnot. But in any case, just wanted to clarify that about religion. So now I can go forward with a clear conscience, knowing that you won't fall into the same trap that I did, and we can talk about the political stuff, and all the negotiations, and all the fighting, and everything that went into the Civil War. So I'll be back soon with part 3. Thanks.